So this is the Canon RP. In a lot of ways, it is one of the best cameras that I have ever had the pleasure of using. And in a lot of other ways, it is one of the worst cameras that I've ever used. Let me explain. So over the past week and a half, I've shot almost exclusively on this camera, the Canon RP. I've shot some B-roll at the botanical gardens for a project I'm working on. I've shot some portraits, some landscapes, some photos of my dog, some listing photos for a car, and some cameras that I'm trying to get rid of. And I have a lot of thoughts on this camera and the way that it performs and where I think this camera really fits in the world of full-frame mirrorless cameras nowadays. The Canon RP was released in 2019, and it was intended to get your foot in the door with a full-frame mirrorless camera at a very attainable price. So before we talk about my experience using this camera, let's talk about some of these specifications. The Canon RP was Canon's second full-frame mirrorless camera, succeeding the EOS R. At the time, you can get one brand new for $1,200, and nowadays you can get one brand new for around $900, and somewhere between $700 and $800 if you buy a lightly used one. So as for a full-frame mirrorless camera, it is still a very affordable option, but that does mean it comes with some serious flaws. It has a 26.2 megapixel full-frame mirrorless sensor. It has a standard ISO range of 100 to 40,000, expandable up to 102,400 in expanded ISO mode, although realistically, you shouldn't ever use an ISO that high. In continuous shooting mode, it can shoot up to 4 frames per second raw uncompressed. Now, the thing that makes this camera the most worth it, in my opinion, and the most impressive part of the photo performance of this camera is Canon's dual pixel autofocus system. It is incredibly fast, incredibly responsive, and incredibly accurate. And this is Canon's first mirrorless camera to boast a eye autofocus mode in their silent servo mode, assuming you have a suitable lens paired to it. Now let's talk about the video specs real quick. As far as top line numbers go, it does boast 4K shooting, although that comes at the cost of a 1.7 crop, which we'll talk about later. As far as 1080p shooting, it can shoot up to 60 frames per second in 1080p, and that is at the full frame, using the entire sensor. So those are the top line numbers. And on paper, getting a full frame mirrorless camera that has fast performing autofocus, that has 4K video, 1080p at up to 60, there's a lot of reasons to get this camera, especially because you can get it at under $700. And it does give you access to Canon's fantastic range of lenses, especially lenses like this one, the 24-105, which is an excellent walk around everyday lens. So in the intro of this video, I said this was one of the best cameras I've ever used and also one of the worst cameras that I've ever used. And I think to fully explain that statement, I have to put it into different contexts. So let's start off with the context of an everyday walking around photo camera. So for anyone that's looking to get into a full frame mirrorless camera, for anyone that is maybe a prosumer kind of photographer, a hobbyist that makes a little bit of money on the side but doesn't do full-time or real demanding professional photography, this camera is absolutely excellent. The autofocus performance is fantastic. It's sharp, it's accurate. The eye autofocus is amazing. It is tack sharp when you're doing portraits, and it does it incredibly fast. And at 26.2 megapixels, it has all of the resolution that you realistically need. It's slightly higher resolution than the standard 24 megapixels, so you have a little bit more room to crop into your photos if you need to. On top of that, it's incredibly light. So if you're someone that wants to take great photos while traveling, great photos while just walking around the park, going on a hike, this is an excellent camera for that. Even paired to a relatively heavy 24-105 f4 lens, it was not fatiguing to carry around. And the ergonomics of this camera are excellent, considering that it is an actual full frame body. It has a nice deep handhold here so that it is very comfortable to carry around for a long period of time. While I was shooting for a few hours at the Botanical Gardens, I never found myself fatigued carrying around this camera. So I think you can use this for a very long time and be comfortable. So we already talked about photo performance and the ergonomics. Let's talk about this lovely feature that you get, and that is the fully articulating LCD screen that does function as a full touchscreen. That is a feature that is not very easy to find on a sub $1,000 full frame camera. And so if that's important for you, this camera might be worth it for that alone. The touchscreen is incredibly responsive. You can use it to select between one of your 4,779 autofocus points. You can use it to navigate your menu. You can even drag to change focus like you're pulling focus, which if this camera performed better in video would be a fantastic feature, but you can't really use that to its full effect. However, if you're taking landscapes, if you're taking portraits, it is incredibly useful to have the touchscreen to select your focus points, and it's really easy to change your settings and navigate your menu using the touchscreen. And on top of that, it has a good selection of outputs and connectivity ports. It has a mini HDMI out for external recording. It has a USB-C in for using a backup battery with it. It has a microphone in and a microphone out port. And it also has a dedicated port for a remote control or a shutter release if you want to shoot like a time lapse or just have a remote control connected to it. And although I haven't gotten to test this just yet, it does have a focus stacking feature, which is fantastic for those landscape photographers that want to get every single layer of their frame in focus. For photos, this camera does everything you want it to and more. It gets you access to the fantastic line of RF lenses. It gets you access to the image stabilized lenses from Canon. It gets you access to adapted lenses like from vintage cameras, from older EF lenses, so you can continue to use those lenses on this new mirrorless body. And it just does a lot of the things you really want it to for photo. Where I ran into all of my problems, and the reason why I say this is also one of the worst cameras I've ever used, is the video performance. So for a camera released in 2019, 4K is an absolute must. It was a luxury for a lot of cameras released up until the late 2010s, but after 2015, 2016, 4K really became pretty accessible in cheaper cameras. Now, they were always rather expensive in full frame bodies, and for a long time there was not a lot of compelling options, but by 2019 there were a lot of pretty good compelling options for full frame mirrorless cameras with 4K video performance. And this camera unfortunately really fell at the bottom of the barrel. Now, one caveat we have to add is that this was a cheaper, very affordable full frame body, so you can't expect the best performance out of it. And so keeping that in mind, 4K at a 1.7 crop is a small price to pay to have 4K in a full frame body for sub $1,000. Assuming you bought this new in 2019, it would have run you about $1,200, so slightly over $1,000, but still relatively affordable for a full frame mirrorless camera at the time. Where the biggest problem for the 4K lies is that the dual pixel autofocus, and honestly autofocus in general, is not available for the 4K shooting mode. See, for whatever reason, Canon opted to disable dual pixel and tracking autofocus in the 4K mode. So you'll see in some sample clips, in 1080p, the focus is incredibly fast, it is incredibly accurate, and it does a good job of tracking the subjects because in 1080p mode, it is the dual pixel autofocus. But in the 4K mode, it retains some form of older phase detect or contrast detect, some kind of autofocus that just does not work. It is so incredibly slow and inaccurate, and it doesn't detect faces, and it doesn't honestly detect subjects very well either, that unless you're shooting in a fully closed aperture like f11, f22, where everything is in focus regardless of how far away it is, things are going to be out of focus. So essentially what that means is in 4K mode, you have two options. You can shoot with a manual focus lens or something with an external focus, like a focus pulling mechanism or some kind of external servo motor to pull focus, which is going to be a significant added cost if you want accurate focus. The other option is you can shoot everything with a closed aperture at like an f8, f11, and just have no depth of field in your videos whatsoever. And that might be fine, but it really limits you creatively in what you can do. Third option, which to me is an unacceptable option, is to shoot everything in 1080p. And for a camera that was released 5 years ago, that is utterly unacceptable. There were cheap APS-C and even Micro Four Thirds cameras out there that gave you full 4K with the ability to autofocus accurately, with the ability to use depth of field, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense if you're wanting to shoot video to make that sacrifice of not having the ability to autofocus in 4K essentially. Now the other thing too is that 1.7 crop. Realistically, you can work around that, but to put it in perspective, the lens I'm shooting on right now is 24 millimeters. And so if I were to shoot on this camera in 4K using the 24 millimeter to 104 lens at its widest focal range, the video would look more like this, zoomed in 170%. And you can work around that, but it really limits you in terms of how wide you can go for a shot. And not having access to a wide shot really limits you creatively, again. Now, since we're on the topic of some of the bad things about this camera, let's talk about the battery life. It is about on par for what you would expect in a mirrorless full frame camera. At best, you might get a couple hours of shooting photos on it. If you're shooting video, you will find that battery life significantly shortened. And if you don't turn it on and off to try to preserve battery between photos, you're probably not going to get a ton of usage out of it. So ultimately, the question to answer about this camera is, who is it for? Really, my problems with this camera are for the video specs. So if you're a hybrid shooter, this camera probably isn't for you. But if you're someone that wants to shoot only photos, this camera might be perfect. If you're someone who wants to get into photography, especially if you want to take portraits, and you have a slightly larger budget to start out with, this is a great way to just jump right into full frame cameras. You can realistically use this in a lot of professional settings. If you're someone that wants to travel around with a light kit, or if you're someone that wants to get creative and use vintage lenses on a modern camera, this is an excellent way to do that. And for the same price of a lot of higher end APS-C cameras, you get a full frame mirrorless body out of it. And of course, if you're someone that's currently shooting on APS-C or any kind of crop sensor and you want to make the jump to full frame, this is a great cost-effective way to do it. Now, if you are a hybrid shooter and you want to do anything at all with video, I'm going to recommend a hard pass on this camera. Quite frankly, there are better options for the similar price point out there that will combine all of the features you need for photo and video. A great example of that is the Sony a6400, which I actually just did a video on if you want to check that out. All right guys, so that is pretty much it. Those are my thoughts on the Canon EOS RP. A real contradiction within itself, and one that left me with a lot of mixed feelings. Ultimately, I am gonna wind up getting rid of this camera. As much as I love this lens, as much as I love the autofocus performance, the photo performance in general of this camera, I just can't find a good reason to keep this camera because of its limitations video-wise. But hopefully this video helped you guys out. If you were considering getting this camera, if you were a hybrid shooter, hopefully I helped you avoid some of the disappointments video-wise with this camera. But if you are a portrait photographer, a travel photographer, a landscape photographer, and you were looking at this camera, hopefully this video helped you out in making that decision. If it did, please hit that like button. If you own this camera, please let me know your experience with it in the comments down below. I would love to hear, especially if you're a hybrid shooter, how you found using this camera and if you had the same limitations that I did. But with that, that is the end of this video. If you want to see more photography related content like this, please hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in the next one.